Before I begin the lecture, just one short comment about it. For those of you who are not familiar with Mullah Nasruddin, there are several snippets of what's called the wisdom of the wise fool in these lectures. So Mullah Nasruddin is a kind of everyman, you know, and we learn through his silliness, his humanness, his wise dealings. And I came across Mullah Nasruddin's stories, as many of us did when I was a teenager. A guy called Idris Shah released these books of Middle Eastern wisdom, and I thought they were rubbish. I mean, I really didn't get them. And when I got into my late 20s or so, these stories would come back, and the deeper wisdom of them would come back, a little bit like Zen stories, which are sometimes just don't make any sense. And then 20 years later, you go, aha, there it is. So that's the Mullah. He is owned variously by Sufism, by various spiritual paths and religions, and maybe that just reflects his everymanness. The lecture today begins with an introduction to the novenas as a whole. And as some of you know, I had this period of kind of just automatic writing, or just letting things through, or what Robert once called channeling. I didn't subscribe to it, but I take full responsibility, you see, for these writings. But nonetheless, it was an overwhelming kind of tsunami of material. So rest assured, when I speak this talk with you of the Novena teachings, like the other 41 talks in these series, they are as new to me as they are to you. I hear them in that way. So we begin today the talk on surrender with an introduction to the lecture series known as Novena Teachings. For the purposes of the introduction, I'm going to assume I'm talking to modern day sadhus. I use this term in the sense of a woman or a man committed to seeking freedom, those who are in search of themselves. Gnostics, sometimes mystics. I am going to assume that you have arrived here today in this moment because you seek something, because something is needed in the search for truth. I am going to assume also, and this is only logical, that your present path, discipline, and practice does not provide you with what you seek here, because otherwise, why are you here? Why not simply remain where you are on your path? I am going furthermore to challenge you, as I hope I will in all these 9 novena teachings, by inviting you, when you are ready, to be chaste, to be loyal, committed in heart, mind, and soul to your chosen spiritual path, and to follow it through to the end. One of the difficulties about this subject of path is that it has become misunderstood. It appears that many paths are available to us, and that like a kid in a spiritual supermarket, we may run around handling the goods until we make up our minds about which one to purchase. In the outer world, this is absolutely correct. We shop around, we give it all some thought. We see if we can obtain it cheaper elsewhere. Then we make our purchase. It's all very sensible. But when you enter the true spiritual sphere, as has been remarked many, many times before, you enter a topsy-turvy world. A world in which everything is upside down and inside out. You enter a world in which the usual rules do not apply. In fact, the rules of the spiritual world are most likely to be completely inverse to the rules of the outer world. They are illogical, irrational, they are heart-led, heartfelt, soulful, spiritual, sacred. Our first intimation of the irrational, one I think we may all be able to relate to, occurs in the emotional realms. Emotions, learning to feel them, allow them, and release them, are extremely important to us as psychophysical organisms. But they are also of great spiritual significance, because the rational mind is synonymous with the ego. No mind, no ego. Irrational emotions may undermine the ego, and they may also be a doorway to true spirituality. Our irrational emotions have been sidelined. They have been ignored. And as anybody who has been ignored by their friends or family will know, being ignored makes you feel sad and hurt, afraid and angry, vengeful and guilty. Ignoring and ignorance comes from the Latin word ignorantia, which means unaware. In the present culture, we ignore and are ignorant of the process and the healing aspects of emotions, to our great cost. Because we are so unaware. As you can see from the tremendous rise of so-called mental disorders, the situation now is so ludicrous that the psychologists decided everyone is mentally ill. Revising the diagnostic manual, psychiatrists have now agreed everyone suffers from at least one mental disorder. This is hardly intelligent. Mental disorder is the new norm. Forbidden emotions, concealed guilt, and taboo tendencies are relegated to the unconscious. The unconscious communicates to us through insights, accidents, dropping inhibitions, say through intoxication, and most of all, through dreams. Dreams can help us understand the topsy-turvy principles of spirituality, which in appearance resemble our relationship to the emotions. If you dream of a person chasing you down a blind alley with a knife, you run. You run because you think you are in the outside world and that a person is chasing you with a knife. In other words, you believe in the appearance of what is happening, but the two do not translate. Let me give you an example. Max dreamt he was being chased by a man with a terrifying face, distorted and covered in sores and spittle. This man clutched a weapon of some kind and pursued Max until he cornered him in a narrow side street with no exit. That's when Max woke up. I took him back into the dream and encouraged him to consciously choose to meet his pursuer and to narrate the events to me as they unfolded. Max re-experienced the dream events until he stood in the narrow side street being approached by his pursuer. At the point where he had woken up before, he looked strongly and clearly at his pursuer and took the initiative instead. He asked, "What do you want from me?" The pursuer halted and transformed into Max's personal forms of terror, the embodiment of his fears, a scaly monster, a figure from a horror movie he had seen in his childhood, his father's angry face, his own child's face crying and screaming, the imagined faces of those unfortunate beings in hell who suffered, wailing and gnashing of teeth, which he had heard in a church sermon when he was 8. One by one, the forms of his fear appeared before him, and when they subsided, his pursuer's form metamorphosed into a being of transparency and light, of great tenderness and unconditional love. As Max realized this figure from which he had been running away was the form of the divine, he took it in his arms and became one with the body of light and love in deep surrender.